My ex-wife, let's call her Patricia, informed me over the phone that she was initiating divorce proceedings and had already sold our coastal residence to embark on a new chapter with her personal trainer. Her laughter echoed through the receiver. I maintained composure, responding, "I understand. My name is Robert Miller. At the age of 54, I dedicated 25 years to commercial real estate negotiations, primarily in Orlando, Florida. My specialty lay in recognizing undervalued assets within contracts that others had hastily approved. My career thrived on patience, meticulousness, and an acute awareness of details that often escaped others' notice. Regrettably, I hadn't applied the same level of scrutiny to my own marital situation until it was nearly too late. The call arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was in London, finalizing the acquisition of a large industrial complex for a prominent logistics firm. 5 days into my trip, approximately 4,000 miles from home, Patricia chose this moment to dissolve our 17-year union. "Mark and I require a fresh start," she continued, her voice laced with the self-assuredness I'd encountered countless times in the accounts of divorced colleagues. The beachfront property fetched a substantial sum. The sale was finalized. Mark Jenkins, her fitness instructor of the past 20 months, a 37-year-old driving a vehicle beyond his means, and who once shamelessly inquired about the price of my wristwatch, was her partner in this endeavor. I didn't react dramatically, refraining from slamming my hotel desk or raising my voice. I calmly asked, "When did the sale close?" "Yesterday," she replied, seemingly disappointed by my tranquil demeanor. "The new owners are moving in next week. I assumed you wouldn't mind staying at the Hilton upon your return, given your frequent travels." Samantha Davis, my trusted title agent for over a decade, and David Evans, my legal counsel since before my marriage to Patricia. The subject line simply read, "Urgent, suspected fraudulent property transfer." Rain commenced outside my window, cascading down the cobblestone streets. I observed city dwellers seeking shelter, raising umbrellas and hurrying into coffee shops. 17 years together, and Patricia didn't truly know me. She perceived me as predictable, passive, someone who would readily accept her decisions. However, she overlooked one critical detail. You don't spend decades in property negotiations without mastering the art of asset protection. And you certainly don't leave your financial well-being to chance, particularly when your intuition has been subtly alerting you for months that something was amiss at home. I met Patricia Thompson 18 years ago at a real estate conference in Miami. She worked for a high-end property management firm, exuding both sharp attire and even sharper ambition. Her self-confidence and sharp intellect impressed me greatly. We were married within a year, a simple courthouse ceremony with only immediate family present. 3 years later, we acquired the beach house on Hilton Head Island, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a wraparound deck offering breathtaking ocean vistas. It cost $1.5 million, nearly all my savings supplemented by a significant mortgage. I dedicated weekends to maintaining the property, repairing weathered exterior elements, upgrading the kitchen, and replacing deteriorated deck boards, while Patricia focused on interior design and entertaining. "This is our forever home," she declared, raising her glass of wine on our first night there. I believed her. For a decade, our relationship thrived. She left property management to launch her own interior design firm, providing her the flexibility to join me on international business trips. My workday expanded to encompass weekend excursions to Rome, Lisbon, and Hong Kong. We were a successful team, or so I believed. Have a productive meeting. Safe travels. The affectionate messages, "I miss you. Looking forward to your return," vanished. Then came the gym membership. 5 days a week, she trained with Mark, a former collegiate athlete who transitioned into personal training. Initially, I supported her renewed focus on fitness, but then came the unexplained charges on our joint credit card. Dinners I wasn't privy to. Weekend spa trips with unfamiliar companions. I didn't confront her directly. I didn't resort to tracking apps or private investigators like some of my divorced colleagues. I simply observed, made mental notes, and quietly prepared for what seemed increasingly inevitable. 11 months earlier, I had transferred ownership of the beach house into a revocable living trust. The paperwork was discreetly filed among refinancing documents for our investment property in Naples. Patricia signed everything without a second glance, engrossed in texting while my attorney patiently waited. "This safeguards us both," I'd remarked. It wasn't entirely false. The structure would indeed protect the property, though not in the manner she anticipated. I never mentioned it again, merely observing her growing distance, her increased reliance on her phone, her dismissiveness of our shared future. After emailing my attorney from London, I closed my laptop and retrieved the property deed from my briefcase. I always carried it, a habit dating back to the early stages of my career, when a client attempted to renege on a deal, citing discrepancies in paperwork. The deed explicitly stated that the Hilton Head Island property was held within the Robert Miller Revocable Living Trust, with me as the sole trustee. Patricia possessed absolutely no legal right to sell it. The irony wasn't lost on me. In our early years, she often teased me about my meticulous approach to paperwork, my habit of scrutinizing every clause in every contract. "Life's too short for legal jargon, Robert," she'd say with a laugh. But that legal jargon had formed the foundation of my career, and, now it appeared, the salvation of my home. I contacted David while strolling through Trafalgar Square. "She cannot sell what she does not own," he confirmed after I detailed the situation. "Any sale she initiated is legally fraudulent. The purchasers have no valid claim." "And Patricia?" I asked. "Attempting to sell property she doesn't own constitutes fraud. Criminal charges are a possibility, though I suspect that's not your preferred outcome," he replied. "No," I admitted. Despite everything, I didn't wish to see Patricia face legal repercussions. However, I couldn't allow her to seize the house. "I've contacted the county recorder's office," David continued. "They've flagged any attempted transfers on the property. I'll also notify all relevant title companies. This sale will not proceed, Robert." Following the call, I didn't immediately return to my hotel. I located a small cafe and ordered coffee. I remained there for nearly 2 hours, observing the flow of tourists and locals, grappling with how 17 years of marriage had dissolved into this moment. What struck me most was a wave of anger, a stark realization. The betrayal wasn't merely about another man or the unauthorized sale of our home. It was the casual cruelty, the laughter in her voice as she delivered the news. As if my pain was merely an amusing aside, as if our life together held no significance. I sent a concise text to my London client explaining a family emergency requiring my immediate return. I booked the first available flight to Florida. During the 10-hour flight, I didn't watch movies or review reports. I simply sat quietly, an unusual calm washing over me. For years I'd navigated intricate property negotiations for others, always identifying the leverage points that would benefit my clients. Now I would employ those same skills for my own advantage. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, about restoring balance, about rectifying the situation. By the time the plane touched down in Orlando, my course of action was clear. I wouldn't shout, plead, or attempt to salvage what was irretrievably broken. I would simply enforce the contract she'd signed but had neglected to read. In property matters, signatures consistently outweigh intentions. That was a lesson Patricia was about to learn. I didn't inform Patricia of my early return. I rented a car at the airport and drove the hour to Hilton Head Island in silence. It was shortly after midday on Saturday when I arrived at our driveway. A black Porsche convertible I didn't recognize occupied my usual parking space. Mark, I presumed. The front door was unlocked. I could hear laughter emanating from the kitchen. Patricia and a male voice discussing what sounded like renovation plans. "The wall between the living and dining areas should be removed first," the man was suggesting. "Open concept design is paramount in coastal properties." I quietly placed my suitcase down and approached the voices. Patricia leaned against the kitchen island, wearing a sundress I'd never seen, a glass of champagne in her hand. Mark stood behind her, his arm casually around her waist, pointing at something on a tablet. They both looked up as I entered. Patricia's smile faltered momentarily before she recovered. "Robert," she said, her surprise poorly masked. "I didn't expect you back until Monday." "Evidently," I replied, glancing at Mark, who at least had the decency to remove his arm from my wife's waist. "This is awkward," Mark stated with a nervous chuckle. "I should probably leave." "Actually," I countered, "I'd prefer if you remained. This appears to concern you as well." Patricia's expression hardened. "We needn't complicate matters, Robert. I've been unhappy for a considerable time. We both deserve a fresh start." I nodded calmly. "I concur entirely, which is why I've already consulted with my attorney regarding the fraudulent property sale you attempted." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" I placed my briefcase on the counter and retrieved the trust documents and property deed. "This beach house is not yours to sell, Patricia. It hasn't been for almost a year." Mark appeared bewildered. "You stated the sale was finalized," he said to Patricia. "It was," she insisted, but I could detect uncertainty creeping into her expression. "Examine the deed," I suggested. "The property is held in the Robert Miller Revocable Living Trust. You signed the transfer documents last June. Recall those refinancing papers you didn't bother to read. She snatched the papers from my hand, scanning them frantically. This is impossible, she whispered. Not only is it possible, it's legally binding, I continued. The sale you initiated is void. The buyer has already been notified. Mark's confidence visibly deflated. I'll wait in the car, he mumbled, making a hasty exit. Once we were alone, Patricia's shock transformed into fury. You tricked me, she accused. No, I corrected her. I protected my assets, standard practice in my profession. You chose not to read what you were signing. That's not deception, it's negligence. She tried a different tactic, her voice softening. Robert, be reasonable. We can divide the proceeds. There's no need for legal intervention. Except that legal counsel is already involved, I replied. Not only mine, the buyers are understandably upset about purchasing a property from someone lacking ownership. They're contemplating their own legal options. You wouldn't, she whispered. I'm not doing anything, I clarified. I'm simply upholding the legal ownership of the property. Future actions depend entirely on your choice of course. Patricia's face hardened again. She grabbed her phone from the counter. I'm calling my sister's lawyer. You won't get away with this. I didn't argue, simply nodded and said, you should definitely consult an attorney. I'll be staying at the Hyatt tonight to provide you space. But to be clear, this house is not for sale. And I will be returning on Monday. As I turned to leave, she called after me. This isn't over, Robert. I glanced back at her. Standing in the kitchen we'd renovated together. Champagne still in hand. Actually, Patricia, I believe it is. Sunday morning I met David at his office. The space was unusually quiet, devoid of the usual paralegals and assistants. David looked weary but resolute as he spread several documents across his desk. There's more, he said without preamble. I had my investigator conduct a thorough inquiry following your call. He pushed a folder toward me. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, and property records I'd never seen before. Patricia has been busy, David continued. She opened a separate account last year, transferring approximately $190,000 from your joint savings. The amount struck me like a physical blow.
That was the bulk of our liquid emergency fund. There's also this, he added, sliding another document forward. Preliminary paperwork for a retail space in Charleston. The lease is in both her name and Mark Jenkins's. They're opening a fitness studio. The agreement was signed 4 months ago. I examined the pages, attempting to absorb the information. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This was calculated, meticulously planned. They'd been working toward this for months, perhaps longer. The timing now makes sense, I murmured, more to myself than to David. She wasn't merely selling the house for a divorce settlement. She required capital for this business venture. David nodded. And there's one more detail. The buyer for your beach house, it's a shell corporation. Guess who owns it? Mark. His brother Stephen Jenkins. They were attempting to acquire the house at below market value through a fraudulent sale, then likely to resell it at a profit once you discovered the sale, and were forced to negotiate. The pieces fell into place with chilling clarity. This wasn't just Patricia leaving me for another man. This was a deliberate financial scheme, designed to extract maximum value before discarding our marriage. I felt a shift within me. The calm acceptance I'd maintained since her call transformed into something colder, more focused. This wasn't solely about protecting my assets anymore. It was about accountability. What are my options? I inquired. David leaned back in his chair. Legally, you're in a strong position. The trust protects the house. We can freeze the joint accounts to prevent further transfers. As for the funds she's already withdrawn, he paused. That's more complex. Florida is an equitable distribution state. She could argue it was her rightful share of marital assets. And the fraudulent sale attempt, that's where we hold leverage. It's criminal fraud, potentially grand theft depending on the prosecutor's interpretation, but I assume you don't desire to see your wife incarcerated." He was correct. Despite everything, I didn't want that, but I also wouldn't be made a fool. "Here's my proposal," David continued, producing another document. "A divorce settlement that's both fair and firm. She returns 70% of the transferred funds and waives any claim to the beach house. You waive any claim to her new business venture. A clean break. No charges." I studied the draft agreement, weighing my options. "And if she refuses?" David's expression turned grim. "Then we pursue all available legal avenues, including potential criminal charges for the fraudulent property sale. But let's attempt a civil resolution first." As I left David's office, my phone vibrated with a text from Patricia. "My lawyer says you're bluffing. The house is joint property regardless of your trust maneuver. See you in court." I showed the message to David, who shook his head. "She's receiving poor legal advice. The trust documentation is ironclad. Send the settlement offer," I decided, "but prepare for court. I doubt she'll choose the reasonable path." I spent the remainder of Sunday in my hotel room reviewing financial records and property documents. With each page, each revelation of Patricia's deception, my resolve hardened. This wasn't simply about a house anymore. It was about standing my ground against someone who believed they could simply take what I'd spent decades building.
Monday morning, I checked out of the hotel and drove to the county courthouse. David had filed the divorce petition early that morning, along with an emergency motion to prevent any further property transfers pending the resolution of our case. By 10 a.m., it was official. Patricia could not legally sell the house, even if it hadn't already been protected by the trust. Next, I visited Seacoast National Bank and spoke with the branch manager, William Peterson, an old acquaintance from my early days in real estate. Within an hour, I'd separated my accounts from Patricia's and secured my remaining assets. "Anything else I can assist you with, Robert?" William asked as we concluded the paperwork. "Just one thing," I replied. "Can you inform me when the next automatic payment to Premier Fitness is scheduled?" He checked the system. "There's a recurring payment of $355 scheduled for tomorrow. It's been charging monthly for about 2 years." I nodded. "Please cancel that. And any other automatic payments except utilities for the beach house." By midday, I'd updated my credit cards, notified my company's HR department of changes to my benefits, and spoken with our insurance agent. Methodically, I untangled 17 years of financial entanglement. My phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the morning. Patricia, then her sister, then an unknown number I assumed belonged to her attorney. I allowed them all to go to voicemail. Around 2 p.m. I drove to the beach house. Patricia's car was gone, but the Porsche remained in the driveway. I used my key to enter, half expecting the locks to be changed, but they weren't. Mark was in the living room, hurriedly packing a duffel bag. He froze when he saw me. "I was just retrieving my belongings," he said quickly. I didn't respond, simply stood in the doorway observing him. "Look, man," he continued, growing visibly uncomfortable. "This wasn't personal. Patricia said the marriage was over long before I entered the picture." "Where is she?" I asked. "At her sister's. She's quite upset. She claims you're trying to ruin her." I almost laughed at the irony. "Is that what she told you? That I'm the villain in this narrative?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "She said you were controlling. That you trapped her in this town while you traveled the world. And the business you two were planning to open using funds from selling my house. Was that my fault as well?" His eyes widened slightly, confirming David's information. "That's what I thought," I said. "You can tell Patricia that her settlement offer is at David Evans's office. She has 48 hours to accept before we proceed to a contested divorce and potential fraud charges." "Fraud?" The fear in his voice was unmistakable. "What are you referring to?" "Attempting to sell property she doesn't own. Opening businesses with misappropriated funds. Take your pick." Mark grabbed his bag and moved toward the door. I stepped aside to let him pass. "One more thing," I called after him. "The buyer, Stephen Jenkins, your brother, right? Tell him that if he wants to avoid being named as a co-conspirator in the fraud investigation, he should formally withdraw his offer on this property by the end of the business day." The look on Mark's face confirmed everything. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was David, informing me that Stephen Jenkins had contacted the real estate agent to revoke his offer on the beach house. That evening, I changed the locks, deactivated the old security system, and installed a new one with cameras. I ordered takeout from the seafood restaurant Patricia and I had frequented during happier times and ate on the deck overlooking the ocean. The waves rolled in steadily, unperturbed by the turmoil of human lives. Tomorrow would bring further legal maneuvering, more angry calls, more disentangling of the life we'd built. But tonight, sitting in the house that remained mine, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not joy. The end of a marriage could never bring that, but the solid certainty that comes from standing your ground when someone tries to take what's yours. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Patricia in David's conference room. Her attorney, a young man with an expensive suit and nervous demeanor, shuffled papers while attempting to project confidence. Patricia hadn't spoken directly to me since that day in the kitchen. She'd communicated solely through increasingly desperate legal threats that David had systematically refuted. Today was supposed to be a pre-trial hearing, but we all knew it wouldn't reach that stage. The evidence was too compelling. The trust deed, bank records demonstrating Patricia's systematic withdrawal of funds, and a signed affidavit from Stephen Jenkins admitting to the fraudulent property purchase scheme. Patricia's lawyer quickly scanned the affidavit, his expression falling. He leaned over to whisper something in her ear. Her face remained rigid, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. "We're prepared to settle," her lawyer announced after their brief discussion. David nodded. "Our terms are straightforward. Patricia returns $120,000 of the misappropriated funds. She relinquishes all claims to the beach house and other properties held in trust. Robert waives any right to her new business venture and agrees not to pursue criminal charges." "And if I refuse?" Patricia asked, her first words all morning. "Then we present this evidence to the district attorney," David replied, matter-of-factly. "Fraud exceeding $100,000 carries significant penalties in Florida." Her lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We need a private consultation." They left the room for 15 minutes. When they returned, Patricia wouldn't meet my eyes. "We accept the terms," her lawyer declared. I didn't speak, didn't gloat, simply signed where David indicated and watched as Patricia did the same. Her signature is familiar to me as my own. After 17 years of shared tax returns, Christmas cards, and anniversary notes. It was over. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of the beach house, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic. The property looked different now. I'd renovated the kitchen, replaced the weathered siding with a more durable material, and installed hurricane-resistant windows throughout. The changes weren't merely practical. They were symbolic, erasing the old to make room for something new. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Patricia and Mark had opened their fitness studio in Charleston, though on a smaller scale than originally planned. The business was reportedly struggling. I felt no satisfaction in this news, no pleasure in her difficulties, just a faint sadness for what might have been had different choices been made. The divorce was finalized, 3 months prior, clean, final. The settlement terms were executed without further drama. Patricia had returned the agreed-upon funds, which I promptly invested in a commercial property in downtown Orlando, a small office building with stable tenants and reliable income. My phone rang. It was Samantha Davis, my title agent. "Just checking in," she said when I answered. "How's the beach house?" "Improving daily," I replied, watching a pair of pelicans soar over the waves. "Thanks again for your assistance with the trust setup." "That's what colleagues do," she said. "Actually, I'm calling because I've located another investment property that might interest you. Similar structure to the beach house, but commercial. Strong protection, steady income." "Send me the details," I said. "I'm interested." After we hung up, I continued watching the ocean. The waves rolled in, steady and predictable in their rhythm. There was comfort in that consistency, that natural order that couldn't be manipulated or stolen. I finished my coffee and went inside to prepare for work. The house was just a house, wood, glass, and concrete. But it was mine. And sometimes, that's enough.